In his latest Substack, Tom Del Beccaro argues that President Trump should seize the opportunity presented by the election of Pope Leo XIV to directly challenge the church's stance on U.S. immigration policy. While affirming the church's role in spiritual care, Del Beccaro stresses that America's government must prioritize citizen safety, border security, and long-term stability. He urges Trump to confront the humanitarian toll of open borders and emphasize that the true compassion lies in law and order, trade over aid and exporting freedom, not incentivizing dangerous illegal journeys driven by failed global governments. Joining us now is my longtime friend, the article's author, Tom Del Beccaro, former chairman of the California GOP. Hi, Tom.
Christian, always great to see you. Frankly, I think you said it better than I did.
I don't know about that. But it's funny. I was just remembering that it was 21 years ago that I got a call from you. I think it was a senior in high school. I got a call from you asking, telling me you wanted to run my article on politicalvanguard.com, your website, which I want to make sure to plug. That was my first published article.
I remember it well, and I'm very proud of all the work you've done since.
Thank you. Thank you. That was right after the 2004 election. So you argue that Trump should directly counter the church's approach to immigration. You're a Catholic, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So how do you envision that message resonating with both Catholics and non-Catholics in the U.S.?
Well, I think this is an important moment. It's not every day you get a new pope, let alone a new president at the same time confronting a very difficult issue. So it's a unique moment. The roles, as you demonstrated, of the two institutions are radically different. The job of the church, if you want to call it a job, is the care for all souls, regardless of their status in life or from where they come. The presidency is very different, especially in the nuclear terrorist age. You remember when I ran against Kamala Harris in 2016, I stressed the danger at the border from a national security point of view. But this moment in time allows a new dialogue to occur because Pope Francis was set in his ways, and we have to come as a civilization to a better understanding of immigration and the challenges that presents. So I hope through Secretary of State Rubio, this dialogue starts where the American government understands the role of the church, doesn't argue doctrine with the church, which J.D. Vance has done, but incorporates the church's understanding of humanitarianism, but makes it very clear that the policies of the Biden administration were actually not humanitarian. They were not charitable. They endangered people. And so we need to get to a better understanding of policy.
Now, the Catholic Church, there seems to have been a lot more politicization in the last few years. What do Protestants fundamentally not understand that maybe you can give us some clarity on with regard to the dynamics of the Catholic Church with regard to public policy?
Well, if you look at the last 1950 years or so, there have been great periods in the Catholic Church history where they were incredibly political, especially during the age of the Papal States, when popes were kings as well as popes. In the last 100 years, international war has also embroiled the papacy because the papacy speaks with clarity, or should, with respect to how nations treat each other. So World War II presented a very distinct challenge, and as did the fall of the Soviet Union with John Paul II. So it's not uncommon for the church to get embroiled in politics. This, however, is slightly different. The church doesn't necessarily, in history, get involved in the internal politics or the border politics. And so, yes, it's not unusual for them to be involved in politics, but border politics presents a different issue which needs a different approach between the presidency and administration and the new pope.
Now, you cite the long-term damage of so-called charitable policies. What examples do you think best illustrate the harm under the Biden administration?
Well, we can go in general. There's often a different approach between conservatives and those who are more progressive or liberal. For instance, conservatives don't believe the welfare state is the best way to approach poverty because it creates dependence and doesn't give people the ability to emerge from their difficulties. That is not that one cares necessarily less than the other, but believes in a very different approach, looking at human nature and the effect big government has had in history. In this particular case, the issue for conservatives isn't that we don't care about the people involved. We very much care about the fact that their internal governments mistreat them, Venezuela in particular. But the question is, what's the best way to deal with that? And the best way to deal with world poverty is not open borders in America, because from where these people are journeying is tremendous danger. And the amount of damage or harm or death, rape, and other things that occurs to them under the southern border, including being sold into slavery, is catastrophic. And that issue needs to be brought to greater light, and then dealing with those countries can be done in the proper perspective.
Yeah, I've always said that the true compassion is the willingness to take an unpopular position on a very controversial issue like President Trump's position on immigration, being willing to burn bridges and risk your reputation and be called a racist, that because you actually care about the human impact of open borders policy. That to me is real compassion. There's nothing crueler than virtue signaling at the expense of real communities being harmed by open borders. Now, you suggest that President Trump make a case for, quote, trade, not just aid, as a solution to global poverty. What would that look like in practice at the border and abroad?
Well, so the issue here is, do you just give people money or do you help them lift themselves up? And historically, international trade has lifted more people out of poverty than authoritarian governments and welfare states. And the best thing to do, therefore, is develop trade with some of these countries so that they have their own industries within them that you trade with and you build wealth. If you look at that African continent today, there is no better example in South America than where this is needed, because in many of those countries, they don't have a thriving domestic industry, but they have authoritarian governments. And the freedom and prosperity occur where the economy and the government are in balance, not where the government controls the economy. And so the value of trade, not aid, is that it builds domestic industries, it supports long-term freedom, and it gives people their own ability to care for themselves. Whereas direct aid in the form of US aid and other things like that accomplished none of those goals in history.
Tom, in the time we have left, I noticed there's a book behind you called The Divided Era. Yeah, remind me who wrote that, and have you read it?
Those are my two books. You're funny. The Lessons of the American Civilization, my current book, and The Divided Era. The Divided Era describes how government every decision government picks a winner and a loser and causes greater division. So the larger government becomes, the greater the division. That book talks about American history in that regard. And of course, The Lessons of the American Civilization talks about the lessons of history as applied to America, and from its inception in the 1500s all the way until today.
Yeah, I still have my copy of The New Conservative Paradigm on my shelf, which is where I first learned about the Laffer curve. You taught me, your book taught me about the Laffer curve, and Art Laffer is a friend of the show who's on quite frequently. And whenever I write for his segment, I always think of you and that book. So listen, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, people can find me at tomdell.com or Political Vanguard, as you mentioned. My columns are there, and they can join me on Substack. And I have a podcast, Politics in Perspective. And funny you say this, but next week's guest is Art Laffer.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for being with us. This is great to see you. And yeah, hopefully, let me know next time you're in the Bay Area. I'd love to hang out.
All right, boss. All right. Good to see you.
That's all the time we have left for the show today. Remember to download the OAN Live app on your TV and your favorite streaming